Alrighty, can't seem to get my webcam to stay steady higher up. Anyways, UFC 125 recap time. Home of a, we'll say, controversial decision. I think that would be fair. Starting out the night, we had Jacob Volkman versus Antonio McKee. Didn't see the fight. From the play-by-play, it doesn't look like they necessarily got the wrong decision. Didn't necessarily get the right decision. It's one of those ones I'm gonna have to find before I really make any judging criticisms or praise. In a nutshell, Daniel Roberts, Greg Soto. Daniel Roberts winning by sub. Kimura in the first round. Impressive. It makes me wonder how he didn't submit for his pets though. That just, I don't know. I don't get it. But anyways, Daniel Roberts kind of, going not exactly not how the people called the fight. A lot of people had this as a 50-50 fight, and Soto wasn't looking bad up until the sub. I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. Then we got Diego Nunez, Mike Thomas Brown. Nunez winning by a split decision. I had Mike Thomas Brown winning rounds 1 and 3 to win the fight, but the third round I could see going to Nunez, so I don't have a problem with this decision. First round we had an illegal knee, which nothing happened with. That's the other thing that I think kind of karma coming back on Mike Thomas Brown is he got away with an illegal knee and wasn't warned or punished or forced to give up an advantageous position where he had Nunez pushed up against the cage and you need him in the head. Also, I don't know what to say about this fight really. Mike Thomas Brown looked good in the first round. He implemented a solid wrestling game. Managed to take Nunez down a couple times throughout the fight. He got into the mid-range where he could strike and take away Nunez's kicks a little bit in the first round. But in the second and third round, he didn't look like he had his energy. And I don't know if that's a physical-related problem or if it was a mental-related problem. And I think he has to definitely go back to his next camp. Take a lesson learned from this that he's, I don't know, he's got to fix whatever that was. Whether that was overdoing it in the first round or whether that was something about what Nunez was doing breaking him a little bit mentally. For Nunez, this is a great fight. Even if he had lost this fight, he had definitely shown a lot. He showed the ability to repulse one of the strongest guys in the division's takedowns. He hung with him on the ground. Again, not a lot done from his back, which is something I think he could use to work on. I think his boxing still needs a little work too, but his kicks are very, very good. He showed the ability to fight through some adversity because his eye was very much swollen, nearly shut, to the point where it kind of looked like it was like displaced or something. And I think that shows a great deal of physical resiliency and mental resiliency, which will greatly help him in future fights, and I think definitely earns a little respect in the eyes of most fans. Then we had Brad Tavares, Phil Baroni. Baroni probably cut after this one. This is 2 straight losses in the UFC for Phil. 3 overall as he lost in Strikeforce on his way out. He's not a UFC caliber fighter, and there's not a lot to say about this fight. I mean, he hurt Tavares, but then Tavares hurt him. There's not a lot to say about a first round stoppage, I think, ever. Moving on, Dustin Poirier, Josh Grisby. Look out for Dustin Poirier at 145. That is for sure because he took the fight to Grisby. People are going to say that, Grisby was a little exposed in this fight, and there is some truth to that. Poirier showed up a little bit, maybe with some striking defensive deficiencies in Grisby's game. Not at range, but once his reaction to getting tagged was not good. When he got tagged, he would just kind of go like this and cover up his head and not really move the block to intercept punches, and it allowed Poirier to just kind of punch around the block. And that's a problem that is going to get you knocked out at some point, or at least very hurt in a fight if you don't react in a better manner than that. This fight just did a lot of good things for Poirier, though. I mean, he showed off some very good wrestling defense. He showed off some very good striking, solid kicks and punches. His ground game looked good because, Grisby's got a good ground game, and he was not close at any real point to stopping the fight on the ground. And Poirier was able to kind of basically steamroll him in a fight that Poirier was supposed to be the sacrificial lamb. So that's good. I don't know. I certainly Grisby's not going to get his title shot against Aldo. I don't know if it should go to Poirier or if it should go to someone else. I probably lead towards Diego Nunez because I don't think Poirier is ready for that challenge yet. I don't think any 21-year-old fighter is ready for that challenge. I mean, that's a fact of life. But Poirier looked very good. Definitely a guy to watch out for at 145 because it's not like despite the fact that I've personally never been the biggest Josh Grisby fan, and I think this fight showed some serious deficiencies. That being said, he's still a quality fighter, and this is a very, very good win. And in the convincing fashion that it was, as not a last second, but a late replacement. Because you think Poirier had to have a good camp. I mean, he was thinking Aldo, and it's not like, and the late replacement, maybe he overlooked him or something, but I don't know. I think this does raise some questions about Josh Grisby. Jeremy Stephens, Marcus Davis. Marcus Davis losing his second straight fight in the UFC via the knockout. Probably will get to come back because he was looking good. Marcus Davis looked pretty good in this fight from a boxing standpoint and got a couple takedowns as well on Jeremy Stephens, which is not the easiest thing to do. Davis does look a lot more at home at 155, was winning the fight up until the knockout, but there are some questions about Davis' ability to take a punch at this point. I mean, granted, Stephens, big knockout power, but coming down from welterweight, does he lose a little something about taking a punch? I don't know. We'll have to see in another fight someone who's more a barometer of the average 155 power if that can hurt him. But Marcus Davis, he looked good. He looked better than I thought he would. I thought the weight cut would be a little too much for him, and he proved that it wasn't. But in the end, Stephens gets the knockout, gets the win, and continues his way up the ladder. Clay Guida versus Takanori Gomi. Gomi continues to just be kind of a frustrating fighter. He didn't look bad all the way through the fight, but that being said, he got tapped out kind of easily by Guida. With very little time left in the second round, couldn't really deal with the pace that Guida was setting. Admittedly, that's not going to be a problem a lot of the time because obviously Clay Guida is famous for that pace. Very few people have been able to deal with it. Those that have are the guys that have beaten him. Outside of, I guess, Roger Huerta, who just kind of caught a knee and knocked him out. Didn't knock him out, but took his back, subbed him. But, I don't know. I'm not quite ready to write off Gomi yet. But I'm also really not, he's definitely not the Gomi of old. I think he still has the physical abilities, but he has to mentally check in. I think he really has to reevaluate who he's training with and where he's training. I think that's something he really needs to consider. Dun-Hyun Kim beat Nate Diaz via how you'd expect. Unanimous decision. Again, Diaz kind of... The Diaz brothers and EB Dubs brought this down awesome. Their weakness is big grapplers who can take them down and who cannot be subbed. We've seen that numerous times throughout Nick Diaz's career, particularly in the UFC, where, of course, he lost to Sean Shirk, Kara Parisian, Diego Sanchez, Joe Riggs also. And that's the type of guy that's going to be the Diaz brother. Because while they do have solid boxing, tough as nails, good cardio, very good submission game, they don't have a wrestling defensive game, really. If you want to take them down, you kind of just can. And DHK did this pretty much throughout the fight. He decided, you know what, we're going to take him down. We're going to dub. And I'm going to check my time real quick left in the video. Okay, we're okay. But that's the story of the fight, basically. Thiago Silva, Brandon Vera. Brandon Vera looking terrible. Probably cut from the UFC. This is 3 losses in a row for him. The Randy Couture fight was not terrible. The John Jones fight was terrible. And this was even worse because this was 3 rounds of domination by a guy who hadn't fought in a year, almost 364 days. Did not look good against Rashad Evans because he looked sluggish, he looked slow. And while Silva did look better in this fight, the ability to take down Brandon Vera more or less at will was concerning. And I don't really know. I don't really know where Brandon Vera goes from this point because he quite obviously has the physical talent to be a UFC level fighter at 205. The issue continues to be with his mental game. He seems to just mentally check out in fights. He doesn't react well to getting beat up at all. Which, you say, well, no one does. But you know what? If you want to be a fighter at a top level, at some point, there's going to be adversity. There's going to be that getting beaten up, and you have to react to it in a way that doesn't involve you shutting down. And that's the story with Brandon Vera. Thiago Silva, what does the win do for him? Not a lot, because anytime you beat a guy who's, basically on the way out the door, and it's, even in the dominating fashion it is, you have to think, what did that really do? He beat a guy who we're kind of giving up on. And that's kind of it. Brian Stann, Chris Lieben. Chase, the Phantom UFC fan, stated that he thought Brian Stann did good by not getting into a brawl with Lieben. I disagree. I think he very much did get into a brawl with Lieben. It just so happens that he clipped Lieben and put him down. And that's how that fight went, basically. I thought, he did exactly what he should not do against Chris Lieben. That was stand in front of him and sling punches and trade blows. And that's a bad strategy. It happened to work this time, but it's not one that I would emulate for anyone in the future fighting Chris Lieben. Unfortunately, this derails the Lieben-Vanderlei fight, which I was looking forward to because, it's Lieben-Vanderlei. That's a solid fight that probably won't happen now, unfortunately. For Brian Stann, it's a win that he desperately needed. He's training with Jackson, so I think you're going to see a somewhat reinvented fighter. Although we didn't this time, but he could in the future. I mean, we've seen what Jackson's has done with Clay Guida. He's turned him into still not a title contender. I think, he's no longer just an exciting fighter. He's a guy who can win fights now. Frankie Edgar, Gray Maynard. I got about 2 and 3/4 minutes to discuss this. The decision was a draw, obviously. I don't necessarily disagree with it. Here goes the fight. We'll break it down. First round, Maynard. He hurts Edgar quite a bit. Easily a 10-8 round. Maybe even a 10-7. I'm seeing it scored that way in certain places. But if you score 10-7, I think that's a little much. But a 10-8 round, Maynard coming in there, kind of doing his thing, hurting Edgar. But the round may have actually been the worst thing to happen to Maynard, because in the second round he comes out and he starts looking for that knockout punch. This allows Edgar to do his thing, come back in the fight, win the second round, couple takedowns, working the in and out game, doing basically what he did to BJ Penn. But the fact is that Maynard showed that he could somewhat stop it. And second round, end of the second round, beginning of the third round, Maynard's corner does a great job of calming him down, telling him to work, we're going to work the striking. We're not going to, just go for that knockout punch. I think he wins the third round. He gets, I think, 2 takedowns in the round. Punishes Edgar a little bit on the ground. I think he briefly even has his back. I think the striking's fairly even. And people are going to point out, like, CompuStats saying, well, Edgar won the standing all the way. I think once you bring that in, you compromise your view of the fight a little bit. I think you put too much faith in stats. When really, I'm a big believer in stats. I think you have to watch the fight. You have to watch the emotion of the fight. You have to watch when the strikes are landed. I think you have to take CompuStat and not think about it too much. Anyways, I gave Edgar the third round. Fourth round comes out. Edgar, I think, definitely, or I gave Maynard the third round. Edgar, I gave him the fourth pretty easily. That's not terribly debatable. Maynard had a pretty bad round, and while Edgar didn't exactly stamp his authority on the round, it was a lot to do with just not being there from Maynard. Fifth round I gave to Maynard because I don't see what Edgar did in the fifth round to win the fight. Overall, I scored it at 48-46, but I could see the fifth round going to Maynard or to Edgar. Thus, I understood the 47 fight. I'm not keen on the people who actually had Edgar winning this fight on the judges' scorecards. I open it to debate, but I think the first and third round go to Maynard, and it's a 3-point gap at least. Anyways, that's my opinion on it. Might be back later with the Q&A video, depending on how things go.